I'm not aware of Yule Swinney claiming to have had children. Jeremy, are you aware of any children from Yule Swinney?
Had shoulder and knee problems?
No, was he a father? Was he a biological father of any children that we know of?
None that I know of.
I haven't heard of any.
I don't know. Oh, can you hear me?
Get closer. That might not be on. We're gonna have to
No,
stay
he was
close.
from.
Are you asking me a question?
Oh, it's on. It's on.
No, Pam, I'll repeat the question, Pam, so you can, the question was, does Yule Swinney have any biological children? And we didn't know of any.
Not that I know of. I don't think so. I mean, that's nice. I know that Mark Bledsoe also, he was a classmate of mine, and I know that Mark actually interviewed him. I don't think he was real receptive to Mark, whatever, but I think he studied some of that. And I could ask him. And I'm just reading Presley's book now. It may be in there.
I know he's from Locksburg. This mic's not working right here.
Hold the button,
Hold the button down on the microphone, and the green light will come
My
on.
dad did tell me that when Yule Swinney did, I guess he walked away. My dad had said he described it as he was escaped or on the loose or something. He told me that 2 people died during that time when he was out of custody.
Yeah, but as far as children, I don't think any of us are aware of any or have heard about it. Okay. Any
Yeah,
other?
it may have been.
We're gonna open to see if there's any other questions.
I have a question.
right?
So, am I correct in hearing?
Actually, wait for Kelly to bring you the microphone.
I can't get up there.
Or you way up at the top? I'm sorry. Yeah, just shout it out.
Okay, let me ask it over the microphone here. So am I correct in hearing that there was no musical instrument ever involved actually in the murder? In any murders? Excuse me.
Right.
As far as being used as attaching a knife to or as a murder weapon, no. There has been speculation on my part, and I've talked to Pam about, the idea that the trombone might have been used as some allusion or symbolic reference with plausible deniability, but whether it had anything to do with my cousin, I can't say with any certainty, but I do know that Charles Pierce did consult with James Tennison, who was the first cousin of H.B., and James was very aware of H.B.'s history and knew that he played trombone, and of course the fact of him being a trombone player was in the 1948 articles after his suicide. So the idea that someone who had confessed to the killings who also happened to play a trombone had been publicized. So it could have been a kind of an illusion without making any firm commitment, symbolically speaking.
But
Right,
in the
but
real
as far
killing,
as the actual crime-
no musical instrument was involved in the actual murder.
Yeah, my father told me that lady did play a sax. He just changed it to a trombone to make it scary and changed it around for like Hollywood would do or something like that.
Any other questions?
My question is about duty being, it's not I know him, Don, calling him by his nickname, being a suspect. When he committed suicide, was that the first time that he was known by name as a suspect, or had he been questioned at any point? I'm a little confused about that. I'm curious.
Okay, yes. So that was the first time that the law enforcement authorities considered him as a suspect. However, I have talked to one Freeman family member who, and this has not been confirmed, I'm having trouble getting access to the person that he says said it, but here's the long story. There were actually 2 James Freemans. The original James Freeman that I thought was the right James Freeman, who was the friend of duty, turns out to have been the wrong person. And Jeremy actually found out that I was researching the wrong person and he put me on the right path. And however, it is claimed by both families, both of James Freemans, that HB actually knew both of them, because one of them was class of 49, and the other James Freeman, I believe, was class of 1950 at Arkansas High School. We have been told that both of them knew HB, and we have also been told by the family of the class of 1950, James Freeman, that at some point in high school, HB actually had gotten physically beat up on certain occasions because of allegations of him being homosexual, and that there were instances possibly relating to those fights, if they occurred, in which he claimed to have been responsible for some of the phantom killings. But the person who told me this attributed it to his mother, who he says who got it from his father, who's the deceased James Freeman from 1950. So it's an unconfirmed thing. You know, whether he was suspected by anyone prior to his suicide, if that story is true, then he might have been suspected or might have been discounted as being just simply a response to having been beat up. But we don't know. But as far as law enforcement authorities, not until his body was discovered on November 5th of 1948 was he investigated by the law enforcement authorities as a suspect. But as I hope I've made clear, not very thoroughly, because you've got to understand by that time, the law enforcement authorities had already conspired to put away Swinney because he was suspected. Many people thought he was the kind of killer. And when, 2.5 years later, after the killing stopped, it's, there haven't been any more killings, and the person who claims to have been the gun is already dead. So the investigation wasn't that thorough, as I hope I've made clear.
I have one
I
question.
wanted to bring, James, we talked about this too. My dad did base his character in Dreaded Sundown on Barney 5. His character, Spark Plug, was inspired by Don Knott. Because it kind of was like that, it was a representation that there was fumbled police work and it wasn't real thorough, and so he kind of threw that in for, comic relief or whatever, but it was also a symbolic kind of thing that there was some, just with all the different agencies involved. And then also he did stress to me that the guy, Gonzalez or whatever, was very much an ego maniac or something, and got too caught up in it and something to really solve it correctly.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes.
How tall was Duty and Sweeney? How tall were they? Because, during the first attack, they gave a description of Phantom Killer, but that was my question, how tall they were.
Yes. So, when H.B. took his life in November of 1948, at that time he was described as being 6'3", but only 130 pounds. However, a photograph, which I didn't show you today, from 1943, shows him being shorter than his two older brothers, and about what you would expect for a 13-year-old to be. So it's very clear that he experienced a tremendous growth spurt between 1943 and 1948. So I think it's likely that he was already at 6 feet by 1946, but I don't know for sure because you have to extrapolate between those 2 points. But yeah, you're right. The Hollis-Larry attack mentioned about 6 foot as in height, I think is.
Swinney was between 5'11" and 6 foot. I've seen it described both ways, so you can give or take an inch.
Okay. And Swinney was how tall?
That's what I just said.
Oh, that was the height of Swinney.
That was
Okay.
Swinney.
Okay, and then Hollis and Larry said their perpetrator, who was masked, was about 6 foot. So really, I think you could, without much stretching, you could fit either suspect into that description, give or take some error. An eyewitness testimony is always potentially subject to inaccuracy. Jeremy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I believe I heard that he was anywhere near 5'9", 6 foot.
Someone said that, some of the people he attacked stated that he was strong as heck. That's what I understand.
I'm blinded by the lights. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
About the riddle, I don't quite understand how the cops solved it. Did they, was it simple enough for them to understand it instantly?
Actually, no. I'm glad you asked that because I didn't clarify that point. They did not use the riddle at all. They just busted open his lockbox. So at some point on Friday, November the 5th, his lockbox was found. I don't know if it was in his closet or in his dresser, but it was in the room, and it was found and busted open. So it's possible that they saw the riddle and said, this suggests that something is hidden in this room that maybe we should be taking a look at. But ultimately, they didn't use the riddle. They just busted open the lockbox. But I had to go back and look at the newspaper, but I'm pretty sure the contents of the pen and the actual, combination note were found too, but that's not the method they used to get the lockbox open. They broke it open by force.
Did Tillman Johnson work for the county? Was he a deputy sheriff of Miller County?
Yes, he was chief deputy for Miller County,
And what about Max Tackett?
Arkansas State Police. At that time, he became later police chief of Texarkana, Arkansas, and served in that capacity until the mid-60s.
Yeah, and Max was, he was uncle to Max Tackett from Nashville, that was a county judge over there.
And of course, he's
And,
Boyd Tackett's brother.
Yeah, Boyd's brother, yeah.
There was suspicion of someone's wealthy son who was responsible for the killings, but they covered it up by sending him away. Y'all have any input on that?
Jeremy?
There was a rumor going around about a minister's son. A minister had turned in his son, and of course, Lone Wolf and police officers had checked this out, and came up that it was just a false rumor that was being spread. He made a statement in the newspaper that this was thoroughly checked. The minister did not turn in his son, and I wouldn't doubt that some people either didn't read the fact that this was false and that rumor had probably spread, and of course the different prominent citizens probably changed over the years, that it was a doctor, it was a police officer, and just several other prominent citizens. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I believe may have happened. It most likely probably bloomed from that one rumor.
I have a question. Was there ever anything else mentioned about a hood after the first attack, or found, or?
None that I know of.
You know, Katie Starks never saw her attacker. None of the other victims are alive. And in the first attack, only the woman saw a hood. The boy didn't. It may have been he was blinded by a flashlight and hit too quickly, but he said he never saw a hood. So basically only one person in any of the attacks saw a hood.
This is actually would be directed to Mr. McDermott as a member of the Texarkana Gazette. Miss Pamela mentioned something that has been a question in my mind from the time that it occurred. She just happened to mention in passing, and it wasn't noticed, that during the time that Mr. Sweeney had escaped, that 2 people had been killed. I believe she's referring to the same incident that I'm thinking of. You would be best, because it was in the paper when it occurred. In fact, the article about this young couple, it was a young man and a young girl the young girl had just graduated from 8th grade.
I'm kind of, you're going in and out on me, but I think that what you're saying is corresponding to what my dad told me.
Okay, well, it happens that the young lady was a friend of my sister-in-law's, and my family and I, my husband and I, we attended the graduation, and I met the young lady that evening. That night, she and the young man she was dating had apparently had intended. That's my understanding. I'm not the gospel, but my understanding was that they were going to run off and get married. The following morning, they were found drowned at Texarkana Lake. And it was the year that the lake had, it rained practically all year long, and Crippled Children's Landing had risen to the level that you couldn't tell where that dip goes down. And my understanding was the following day was Saturday morning, and they had been found, their car had gone over that dip, and the young couple seemingly drowned it there. Well, when I saw the front page article, of course that was headline news. And then down at the very bottom of the page, in a tiny little filler, it had a story about a fellow who had escaped and was thought to be headed to Texarkana. And I don't know, something just in my mind, I connected the two. And then where the gentleman I worked for was friends with Texas Highway Department folks. And so he came back telling us what they had told him over a cup of coffee. And it just sounded really suspicious. And I've always wondered, and one of the things that was mentioned in the article about the escapee was that he was in jail for counterfeiting. Well, fast forward to when Mr. Pierce is making the movie. And a security guard, a fellow who worked, off-duty policeman, worked security for the store that I worked for. And he was talking to us about the movie. And he mentioned, and that was the first time that I learned that Mr. Sweeney was believed to be the killer, but there was no proof. Anyway, he mentioned that Sweeney was in jail for counterfeiting, and my mind went back those years, and there's no way that I personally, I'm just J&Q public. I have no way of checking, and I'm thinking if you could go into the archives or something. I've always wondered if that was the same fellow.
I can certainly check up on it. Was this in
real hard for me
1975?
to hear a lot of what you said that was breaking up. I think I do remember something about counterfeiting though. I did, and there was something about a fire that afterwards the place was set on fire or something. And my dad just told me he thought it was Sweeney that did it. He said that he told me to look at his eyes. When he handed me the mugshot, he said, look at his eyes.
And Pam, Russ has also had a comment in response to.
I'm sorry?
Russ has also wanted to respond to that question as well.
Okay.
Okay, I can check, but this was 1975, because that's when Sweeney escaped for 4 days.
Russ, I can't hear you.
Russ said that Sweeney had escaped for 4 days in 75.
In 1975.
Well, that's the part that puzzles me because the timing of the two incidents would be different. And I wondered when you mentioned that 75, if he had escaped before. And then again, it may not be the same man.
He escaped before, back in the 40s.
Okay.
But,
I texted, after you said what you did, I texted my sister-in-law to ask her. I needed to know what her date of birth was because I was trying to calculate how old they were because it was 8th grade graduation is what it was, which would have made them about 14 years old. Well, that would have made the graduation be around 1967, 68, somewhere in that area, and which is different.
Yes,
But again, it's coincidental that both men were counterfeiters, But anyway, you said he had been escaped for about 3 or 4 days?
He escaped for 4 days. I can go back in the archives and look and see if there were any suspicions.
I wish you would, because that would, and maybe I could get a card or something so I could call you and find out what you might have learned.
Yeah, just go ahead. You can give me a call for paper up there, usually Monday through Thursdays.
I'm going to repeat the next question for Pam so that she can hear it better. Are there any other questions right now?
I have 2 questions. How many people claim to be the Phantom, and how many suspects were considered possible but not able to be ruled out?
Okay, so the question is how many people claim to be the Phantom and how many suspects were considered possible but not ruled out?
Jeremy?
Russ?
There were numerous false confessions. I don't know an exact number, but Max Tackett remembers at least 8 people had falsely confessed to being the Phantom. And what was the other part of the question?
How many people were not able to be ruled out who were suspects?
I think they pretty much ruled out everybody except for the 2 main, the ones that we've covered today.
Well, local police, Captain Gonzalez of the Texas Rangers kept a little list of names he thought might possibly be the Phantom. He, whether or not he thought Swinney did it, or then we really don't know. He never publicly said that. And it was touched on earlier about Gonzalez when he was in Texarkana, how he kind of had the reputation of not being much of an investigator. He was more interested in sitting in the Grim Hotel, getting his hair cut, giving out interviews, going to dinner with local families, dating their daughters. And it's been theorized that perhaps Gonzalez never could accept that some local yokels had solved the case he couldn't say. I mean, he couldn't solve. You gotta remember at the time, Gonzalez was probably, next to J. Edgar Hoover, the most famous lawman in America. I mean, very, very well known. Now, that's just speculation, but from what I understand, Gonzalez did keep a list of names. Swinney was on it, but of people he still considered viable suspects. At the time of his death, he still had that list.
I do think that that's the reason my dad had Ben Johnson to play.
Can you hear us, Pam?
Yes, go ahead. I just remember speaking. But I do think that that's the reason, whoever was saying about the haircuts and stuff, that's very much what my father would do. You know, and that's how he had that character played. I think he hired Ben Johnson because he had won an Academy Award, and he did want to kind of portray this kind of proud man with very much of an ego that was more into it for the publicity, but that was a smart guy. And I think he was a real smart guy, but he wasn't really, I think he was frustrated that they really, there were, people, it was just chaotic, I think. And that frustrated, I think a lot of people.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I have one more. The new movie that came out was supposed to come into theaters on October 16th. And what I heard is that in the Texarkana area, including Shreveport, where the new movie was made, it never came out, but they said that it was only going to show on TV. But the nearest place for people to go see it near us was going to be Houston. So is there, anyone knows why it was never showed in theaters here?
I can take that one.
Okay, so the question, just to repeat it for Pam, is why was the new Town That Good at Sundown movie not shown in the Texarkana area? And Kelly's going to address that.
Theaters in this area are owned by Cinemark, and Cinemark did not think it was economically feasible. In order to show a movie, they have to purchase the rights to the movie for all of their theaters. And they didn't think it was economically feasible because it would only make money in this area. And so it was just a money thing.
And I did hear...
I didn't get to hear that.
Oh,
I was told it was because of distribution.
Okay, distribution problems.
I'm sorry?
There were distribution problems for the new film?
Glenn, that was a question I asked them specifically. I thought that they should have some kind of opening in Texarkana, and they said that it was out of their control, that it was in the distributor's hands, where they were booked and what theaters booked.
I see. And I know that Greg Bischoff went to see it in Dallas before he wrote his review, so I don't know if that's any closer to Houston. I can't remember.
Somebody I heard just through the grapevine that whatever the theater there is in Texarkana won't play a film that was going direct to DOD or whatever. So that could have had something to do with it.
We had heard that as well, that Cinemark, since it was gonna go straight to video on demand within a couple of days, that Cinemark didn't wanna mess with it.
Yeah, the theater that Greg saw it at was not the Cinemark Theater.
Any other?
I had also talked to the Pro, and I'm surprised because I thought it'd be really nice to have a screening at the old Paramount/Pro. And they told me that they do not have a digital projector there to show films right now. So they're working on that. It's in their plan and their budget and stuff, but they don't have it yet. So that's kind of an important thing, you know.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, the law enforcement that investigated this at the time, did you all hear that most of them thought that there were maybe more than one person responsible for all four of the phantom attacks? And I'm wondering what if you guys on the panel think about the same thing, if there was more than one person. Pretty likely that there was more than one person responsible for all four attacks.
Okay, so
And the question was, do people on the panel think there could have been more than one person responsible for all four attacks, and also what did law enforcement think at the time with regard to that question? So we can just kind of go down the line. Let's start that in with Chuck, and then we'll go to the rest.
I'm not sure to answer that question.
Okay,
anyone who wants to comment?
I was told by Dad that the last murders, Reed, or I guess that was a separate. He did not believe that was a Yule Sweeney. He told me that was a family disagreement. And the other day, I didn't talk too much about Dawn about it, but Dawn did tell me that she tried to talk to the lady, and the lady refused to talk to her.
Okay, Russ?
Well, now it's on. Okay. I would say the majority of police officers probably thought all the crimes were done by a single perp. At least that's the way it appears now. We can't go back and ask them. Max Tackett certainly did. Tillman Johnson was a little bit, he was unsure on the Starks killing. We can't go dig up the rest of them and ask, but it seems from what we know now that most of them thought it was a single perp. Like I said earlier, I think Starks killing, from what I see, is unrelated to the Phantom killings, and I'm on the fence on the first one, the first attack. I think definitely the two double murders, the ballistics proved they were done by the same perp. But as far as the Starks killing, if we look at what happened there and what happened to the other three, I think if the Starks killing had happened 3 weeks before the first attack, we wouldn't even be talking about it now.
Yeah.
I'm hearing some of that, and when I say Reed, I mean Stark. I'm using the movie, their names.
Oh, yes. The Starks in the original film, their last name was Reed. Yes, the first and last attacks people are indifferent on if they're connected to the actual two double murders, which has ballistic evidence that those are connected. The first attack, Lone Wolf Gonzalez definitely did not believe that was connected to the double murders, simply because of their varying stories. He didn't know if they were telling the truth, they were covering up for somebody. He had a hard time believing their story. Stark's case, it's pretty different too. For the longest, most of Tillman Johnson's life, he believed that it was not connected, but according to James Presley, he reveals in his book that towards the end of Johnson's life, he came around to finally believing that it was connected after reading over some FBI files. I personally believe that the Starks, I think it's possible that it was the same one, but I don't think it's likely. That's my opinion.
I can't really speak to what the law enforcement authorities believe over beyond what's already been said, but there's one area where I do agree with Jim Presley in his new book, and that's, he says at one point that the differences between the Starks attacks and the other attacks were only superficial. A lot of people think that the differences were substantive, like the different caliber weapon. It was on the Arkansas side rather than the Texas side. It was a home attack rather than people parked in a car or something. But to me, those differences are superficial. I mean, to me, the similarities are that there was a couple attacked in a lonely area by a man with a gun who killed the male first and might have been after the female for sexual or other reasons before trying to kill her. So it's not at all clear. There's no reason that I can think of why it would have had to have been a different person. And as I said in the talk, I proceed with Occam's razor. I first try to find a simple explanation to account for the known facts rather than assume new facts, such as like more than one perpetrator. But I can't say that I know, but I certainly start with that as my profile before and try to rule that out before proceeding further.
My forensics classes put the evidence in the different cases side by side, and there are a lot of the differences that John mentioned. I also spoke with Jim Presley on the phone the other night, since he was not going to be here. His perspective on it is that Max Tackett and Tillman Johnson both believe that there was a single perpetrator for all four of the attacks. I do know that I've also spoken to someone who was friends with Katie Stark's family and Virgil Stark's family, and neither family believed that their killing was associated with the Phantom.
I think we've run out of time, but if there are any remaining questions, we can go ahead and mingle and answer them unofficially. But is there maybe one last question, and we'll have to either be the last one, or otherwise we can go ahead and close at this time.
I just want to thank everyone here for getting together and do this event. I've learned a lot about this. I've met some great people this evening. And I want to thank the whole panel that organized this, Pam Barslow, Chuck Pierce, and the wonderful, wonderful Charles B. Pierce. He'd be very proud to see what we're doing here today. I know, because I've been knowing Charlie a good while too. So anyway, and Chuck, when we're going to do a movie?
Whip out your checkbook.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Kelly, thank you. Thank the wonderful students at Texas High School. Thank you, Texarkana Independent School District. And look up on Facebook, Jeremy's Phantom Killer Forum on Facebook. It's officially a closed group, but you can still join it if you're serious about being a student of these topics.
Texarkana Moonlight Murders is still up too, right?
The Wikipedia page.
The Wikipedia page for Texarkana Moonlight Murders has his information as well. There are books for sale. Mr. Presley's new book is for sale in the lobby. I do still have some copies. And if you would please take a moment to look at the exhibits that are in the lobby. The students of Texas High worked really hard on it. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it very much.